Welcome to Talking Out Cloud, the podcast where we discuss the latest developments in cloud and IT. And on today's menu, landing zones and the well-architected framework. Do we use them? Why or why not? And today I've got with me my colleague Gert-Jan.
Gert-Jan Poffers, Azure consultant working at Intercept, doing cool Azure projects.
Cool Azure projects.
Cool Azure projects, yeah.
Well,
definitely.
It so happens to be that, my name is Wesley. I also work at Intercept as a principal architect. And I also do cool Azure projects.
Yes.
And I think what we love to do is play with the new stuff.
Yeah.
See if it works. Does it work for our customers?
Yeah.
And get excited about stuff. And then we get to talk about it during a podcast. And
definitely. Cool.
That's what we're going to do today. Yeah. So let's talk well-architected framework.
Yeah.
What is it?
Well-architected framework is a framework that can be used as a guideline to implement a landing zone or a structure with a customer when you are going to go over to the public cloud.
All right. And so I found a funny fact because, we do Microsoft Azure. We can say, I'm going to put you on the spot, but we talked about this. Who developed the well-architected framework?
Yeah. So I know the answer already, but that's also because you gave me some insights. But I didn't know that. But was it not AWS?
Yeah, AWS. Yeah. So the answer is AWS formalized their findings into the first version of the well-architected framework in 2014.
That is really
2014.
That's impressive.
But I'm thinking 2014.
Yeah.
Is 11 years ago.
Yeah.
I didn't do Microsoft Azure 11 years ago.
No, I was back doing on-prem stuff, I guess.
Well, see, there you have it. So the well-architected framework, it existed before we started doing cloud ourselves.
Yeah.
I didn't know about it back then.
No.
It's been upcoming for the past couple of years?
Yeah, from Microsoft perspective, I guess so. I heard about it a couple of years ago that they introduced it, and it's a really nice framework when you are implementing new environments or existing environments. It's a little bit it depends on the situation.
Yeah, I think you've got two frameworks, right? You've got the we're talking about the well-architected framework, which tells you this is what your architecture needs to look like, and so you've got infrastructure, and then you need to take that infrastructure into account when you develop your software architecture.
Yeah.
And then we have, and I did know about that back then, was the cloud adoption framework.
Yeah, that's a good one.
That was more into the, do I have on-prem or private data center workloads?
Yeah.
And do I move them to Microsoft Azure in this case?
Yeah.
How do I go about that? What's the maturity of the workload? And do I need training? What kind of cost am I talking about? That's one thing, but that's more the lift and shift kind of thing.
That was a lift and shift, yeah.
And then if you look at the continuous improvement cycle after that, that would be where the well-architected framework comes in, right?
I think that's a good way to express it, because cloud adoption framework is used mainly for lift and shift to see, is my workload migratable? I think.
I think, is it migratable? Yeah.
Is it migratable? And exactly, is my company ready for my transition to the public cloud? And the well-architected framework can be used for fine-tuning your environment to get a better security, to get better resistance, redundancy, that sort of stuff.
Well, that's because the WAF or the well-architected. The thing is with the abbreviation WAF is it can also be web application firewall, right? So I always get confused by that.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, my technical heart talks about firewalling, and then well-architected framework is it's WAF either way.
Yeah, it's WAF, and it is maybe because I also have that contradiction. So if I hear the word landing zone or something like that, then I know, we are talking about WAF.
So we could say the WAF abbreviation is interpreted by context. So depending on the context, we know what you're talking about, right? Yeah. So it comes with the well-architected framework comes with a couple of pillars.
Yeah,
and it started with 5, but I was reading up on this and I got 6. So it started with operational excellence, security, reliability, performance, efficiency, cost optimization.
Yes.
And you mentioned probably all of those, but now we also have sustainability.
Yeah.
So how do we use the web? What I see a lot in practice, and maybe you have an opinion on this.
Yes.
People go, all right, I'm going to modernize my workload. I moved to the public cloud. And here's the big problem with public cloud. Let's say I did the cloud adoption framework.
Yeah.
I had a VM, I picked it up, and I moved it to the cloud. Was that cheaper?
Probably on a long run, maybe, but it's not one-on-one. So if you migrate your workload to the public cloud, you need to do work after the migration to make it cheaper. And I think about reservations. Think about maybe modernization. Modernization is a very good thing. Is that VM needed? Can we migrate to a more modern cloud native way approach? But yeah, that's a good question. I always think if you look at the pillars, you cannot not do everything at the same time. That's my opinion. You can do it, but then you will pay a lot of money. It will cost you a lot of sweat to because things, and especially for an existing environment. If you create a new, it's a difference, I think, with creating a new environment or adjust an existing environment, I guess.
Yeah, and I think interesting on the VMs. Like, are you using the cloud? Did you move the problem? Did you rehost?
Exactly.
Or are you actually using the cloud the way it should be used? So, and that's more a customer thing, I think. Because as we said, we moved to the cloud, and then we recommend them, hey, but now you need to modernize. Now you need to start using the cloud. And then if you make the comparison, I did a lot of these designs 10 years ago, I started doing these designs, right? So what you saw was, I've got a VM on-prem, and I invested in my VM or Hyper-V infrastructure. And I'm going to move that to Azure. But in Azure, I can do high availability. I can do 2 virtual machines and a load balancer.
Yes.
And I can do all the things auto-magically because the cloud provides me with that. And if I use that, then yes, it will be cheaper compared to having the same setup on-prem.
Yeah.
But then, how many applications that run on-prem are suited to run high available, redundant, without state in memory, with state stored locally somewhere, that can do the load balancing, and then the user can end up on machine 1 or 2.
Yeah,
there's not many.
No, and you need to discuss that with the customer or the supplier you are doing the migration for. So, if you look at it like a lift and shift, you have your traditional ES server. You migrate it to the cloud. That's one-on-one. But for a modernization point of view, maybe an app service or something like that can be more useful. But your application needs to be suited for that. Yeah. So with the WAF, you have guidelines to check. Hey, what is the roadmap to modernize my ES server into the cloud when it's already there, or you want to implement it with a new application.
That's because you said you have a roadmap, and I think that's the thing. That's what we see a lot. I've also seen other companies like go to a customer and go, all right, this is the well-architected framework. This is what your solution needs to look like.
Yeah.
But then no software company is going to go, all right, that sounds like a good idea. Let me stop all my product development and focus all my time and money on modernizing. That's not what happens. If we then look at the well-architected framework, it comes with best practices.
Yes.
But do we grab them and just like, all right, so there's your best practice. Does that work?
No, it depends on the case. But normally you will have, I think, trade-offs. I think if you want to do it fast, it will cost you maybe a lot of money, and it will give you less security. So you need to find a good balance for what's important for your company, for your business case. And that's why I always said look at your workloads. And yes, WAF, the well-architected framework is important, but use the best practices. And I think I can also recall that also in the Microsoft documentation, it will say that it's not that you need that it's a guideline, right? So it also said that it's not primary, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. I think that is exactly the argument that that will make a framework like this work or not.
Yeah.
Because then not everyone reads those fine lines like, hey, these are guidelines. In the end, it's a framework, right? And we adopt a framework and then we move within that framework. But I can honestly say for most environments that have just been migrated to the cloud, if we would pick up the best practices from the well-architected framework and apply them on an infrastructure level, the application will stop working. It's breaking change because it's not designed for that. And that's the roadmap you're talking about.
Yeah, definitely. And of course, that doesn't mean that you leave the important thing out of a landing zone. So if you speak about a landing zone, let's say you want to implement a new environment for a customer with a new landing zone, you always go for security. So you always don't want to have public access or that sort of stuff. But it's like you said, it always depends on the application, on the workload, or the server that's being migrated to that landing zone. You can test that, but for production-wise, it will always be a little bit different. So you need to keep that in mind, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, and you said landing zones.
Yeah.
So you've got the well-architected framework. And then you have a landing zone.
Yeah.
What is a landing zone?
A landing zone is a base environment. And not to go... I will go further in details.
Let's go into detail.
But let's say... maybe you already know about it. Hub spoke landing zone. So... A landing zone is more like a base environment that you will put in your infrastructure in the public cloud. Based on best practices. We use the Architect Framework guidelines over there. How is network traffic going? How is security? How is backup, etc. So landing zone is mainly a base environment where you put in your infrastructure, I guess. Yeah.
Okay, so you could say that the landing zone is then the technical execution of the decisions you made.
Yeah.
Regarding your architecture.
I guess so, yeah.
All right, so you said base environment. So let's say, for me, a landing zone is also infrastructure as code.
Yeah.
So let's say I have a landing zone, my base landing zone. Then I need a workload to be hosted there. So maybe I need app service or VMs or Kubernetes or something else. Would that be a second landing zone? Is it layers, or would you say you've got your base landing zone with subscription stuff, and then
it's a good. I think if we're speaking about the landing zone in total, I also maybe you have another opinion, but I also look at it role based. So it's infrastructure as code, like you said, but it's also management groups, subscriptions, and that is layered, of course. But for example, if you have a landing zone, a hub spoke landing zone, where your hub is the main subscription. There's one subscription. Your hub is your main point of network traffic, where all your network is routing in and out from the different spoke subscriptions. Then you will have management groups, subscriptions, and workload subscriptions, if you know what I mean. So if you have an app service, a web app, that will go in a different subscription. If you have an Azure Virtual Desktop environment, that will go in a different subscription. So the landing zone is a total, I say base environment, but I mean base environment in the pillars of your Microsoft Azure infrastructure.
Right. So I'm just trying to reason back here. So you've got your base landing zone, which you're going to build on top of. So that's let's say layer 0. It's got your identity and access management, and your subscriptions, management groups, everything.
Yeah.
On top of that, we need the infrastructure to host a workload. And on top of that, we need the workload to be hosted on that infrastructure. So first, what you would do is you have a landing zone where you have all the security set up in terms of permissions and networking, hub spoke, all that, your routing, firewalling, etc. That determines what the playground is for the infrastructure workload. Yeah. So that determines how I need to deploy my app service. So when I deploy my app service, I need to take it. Let's say when I deploy my virtual machine, I need to take into account I've got hub spoke networking. So I deploy it in a spoke subscription, which has got the virtual network of the spoke. And I need to take into account that the traffic routes to the hub for internet access or whatever, or maybe to a different spoke, but it all goes through the hub. So when I design my infrastructure, I need to take into account what the boundaries are that I'm giving in my initial base landing zone.
Yeah, okay. Definitely. And also it depends if you have another environment that you need to migrate to the new landing zone, then you also need to keep in mind for your newly created landing zone that the workload will work and continue work when you are doing migrating to the new landing zone.
So that's interesting because we have this discussion internally a lot as well. So how do you go about landing zones? And just now, doing this podcast is starting to click. Like you have your base. It's like Lego blocks. You have your base. On top of that, you have your infrastructure. And on top of that, you've got your application or your software.
Exactly.
And it all needs to tie in together. And every layer has its own requirements, if you will.
Yeah, and then if the base is being if the fundamental base is being placed in a good manner, then it doesn't really matter if you build a new workload based on that new landing zone. It's just a Lego block that you click on the new environment, if you know what I mean. So it will probably it's a good metaphor.
That's pretty cool. I'm making mental notes here because we need to talk about this internally as well, because this could be a good document, like, hey, this is our vision on using landing zone. All right, so then we've got the well-architected framework, and then what you see is, Microsoft Azure, you see your recommendations coming in based on the well-architected framework. And then sometimes, I don't know why, there's like this little button that says, click here and we fix it.
Yeah.
Is that a good idea?
No.
Okay.
No.
I thought so.
Yeah, sometimes I will say if you have experience with fixing recommendations, okay, you know what, but no, it's better don't do that because not every recommendation will fulfill your workload needs, and it will probably stop working when you. For example, if you have a recommendation to disable public access on the storage account. I don't know, but your storage account needs the public access. I don't know why. I prefer also to block it. But if you block that, if you click on the fix button, and it will block your public access. That will also mean that your application will stop working. Yeah. So you fix the recommendation. That's cool, but you create your own problem because you also need to build something beforehand. So if you have recommendations, go through them, discuss it with the customer or with the business you're in, and check if your business is ready for all those recommendations. And I don't mean for cost saving perspective, but more like security wise, and because that will have impact when you do a quick fix.
Yeah, because that's that's interesting indeed, because that could be breaking change, and Azure Advisor is not looking. Your example with a storage account. You should the best practice in the well-architected framework, as documented, is disable public access or disable TLS 1.0. Exactly. Well, that's going away anyway, or is gone already. So that's the recommendation, but it does not check if you have traffic coming from. So it doesn't check whether it's a good idea. No. So it's that's when you go from we have best practice and we have best possible practice.
Best possible practices, yeah. Those recommendations are good for to discuss, to have material to discuss with the customer. Hey, this is already on your roadmap. We need to do that in the future. You need to think about a way to hardening your application and to deal with that public access is being closed. But do that in forefront, not.
So if you look at well-architected framework and standards, then you want to incorporate a lot of, or as much as you can in your base landing zone.
Yeah.
Like your Azure policies, IAM, everything.
Redundancy backup.
Yeah. So you already set requirements for the infrastructure being deployed on top of that.
Yeah.
That needs to fulfill those requirements. And then we always need to reason back. I've got a solution that already exists. Because if it's built new, like greenfield, then you can do all the best practices. You should be fine.
Definitely.
But we rarely have greenfield. It's usually brownfield or something like that. So we have to reason back. Those requirements, are they not breaking changes for the application?
Exactly.
And then I think the well-architected framework, it's a framework. It's a life cycle, right? Let's say we can give it a score. Let's say you score 60% on the well-architected framework. You want to check that again in a month, right? And a month after, and then make decisions based on that. Maybe fill your product roadmap.
Yeah, exactly. But keep in mind that there always be new recommendation from Microsoft. So I think 100% score on the framework is not doable. But as high as possible is the goal.
I had that the other week for a customer. I did the secure score, the defender score. I got it up to like 94%.
Ooh, that's
I'm like,
nice.
that's good.
Yeah.
The week after, 60. I'm like, why?
What happened?
They introduced a bunch of preview checks, which also counted towards the secure score. I'm like, what? Explain that to the customer, right? But that's how you go about their life cycle.
Yeah.
And then you also have the well-architected review, which it's like a form, right? It's you just go through it.
Yeah. Yeah, I did that once. It's mainly to check if your environment is being followed by the best practices of Microsoft. Mm-hmm. But also Microsoft is saying in that review that is not good or bad in that example. It's just more like to give you a notice and give you an overview of how you implemented the environment. And it's also with the well-architected framework. There's no good or wrong. It's just like I said in the beginning, it's guidelines and best possible practices. That's also a good one.
And I think that review, like you said, it's not good or bad. It's just a way to, if you incorporate that into your processes, like the well-architected review or a architectural review in general, it's more like let's do that every 3 months. Yeah. Or maybe once every 6 months, depending on your size. It's a way to get out of the day-to-day chaos of things and just take a step back and like, all right, what did we build? What are we doing?
Yes.
Is it still a good idea? Is it following our product roadmap? Do we need to make other decisions? I think it's a very valuable framework that is often underestimated or seen as we have to go through. I mean, to be fair,
it is also a big document. So if you go over to the page, you will see that there's lots of pages to be covered when you are doing it. But it is really interesting because if you read it letter by letter, then you will see that it's covering everything what's needed to be done I don't expect that people know that from out of them their head, if you know what I mean.
I think to draw a comparison, I've been working at Intercept for like 10.5 years now. That's long. 10.5 years.
That's a long time.
But like pretty soon after the beginning of Intercept, we decided let's do ISO 27001. Mm-hmm. And in all fairness, we did not do that because it gave us more security.
Yeah,
it's marketing, right? We wanted to have, and the WAF is not marketing, but we wanted to do that because customers asked for, do you have a certification? It was easy to sell things when you have that certification. But, and I did it for like the first 2-3 years. And then we also had a very good other person on board who did this way better.
Yeah.
And he started to really look into the life cycle of things, like doing periodical reviews and then he used that framework because ISO 27001 is also just a framework.
Yeah,
but he used the processes, that life cycle, to actually go for continuous improvement. And that's when we saw that it was beneficial and adding value. It was making our processes more secure. And that's when you really start using the framework. But with WAF, a couple of years ago, I'm also involved in or Azure Expert MSP certification.
Yeah.
Which also requires you to follow a lot of Microsoft standards and processes. One of them doing an architectural review, preferably the well-architected review.
Yeah.
In the beginning, I would just pick a customer and go through the motions because we did them differently. But now I'm looking at it, I'm like, well, if we can add that into a recurring process for customers, it's good. It's good for sales as well, right?
Yeah,
you can tell them
I think
you need
so.
to do it, but also it forces everyone, including the customer, because we work with a lot of software architects and developers. Yeah. They're also in the day-to-day chaos of meeting the sprint goal and working on the items that are on the board. Taking a step back and going, all right, so what are the decisions we need to make going forward? Exactly. It forces everyone to take a step back and really look at what we're doing.
Exactly, and it's
that's the framework.
Definitely, and it's also good to mention that that it's not something but that Microsoft is saying, hey, this is back practice. So sometimes maybe a customer think, oh, yeah, Gert-Jan is saying something because he's like that setting. No, it's something. It's being discussed in the WAF framework. Yeah.
And I think that a framework like this, with the practices, is moving us to a more cloud-native cloud and really using the cloud. And that's when it starts getting efficient, right?
Yeah, definitely. And we always talk about security and about cost efficiency and resiliency. And I think when going over to, like you said, to the cloud native within in a framework, you will have the best. You have done everything you could to make it the safest way possible, if you know what I mean.
All right, and the last topic for this episode, on the topic of landing zones, and this is an ongoing, everlasting discussion that will probably never end, but it's very interesting to talk about. We always say, all right, we want to do pipelines or GitHub actions, and when you create a landing zone, do you always redeploy the landing zone whenever you make a change? Is it even possible?
No. Yeah, it is. Yes and no. I found it really hard to answer that question because we have some services also running in Azure that will be having some downtime when you do a redeploy.
Yeah.
Let's say you want to add an Azure firewall rule, something like that. It will redeploy the Azure firewall instead of only adding the rule. So.
Oh really?
Yeah,
that's not good.
No, that's not good. So the question, it's a good question. I think using pipelines to deploy your new stuff is definitely the way to go. But don't redeploy the whole landing zone.
All right.
But maybe you have another opinion about it.
No, I find it quite the struggle.
Yeah.
Because yes, we want to make sure that whatever is in Azure in this case is in my infrastructure as code. So technically, I should be able to click and deploy it without breaking something.
Yeah.
But then, to give another example, let's say I'm using Ubuntu version 19 or something old.
Yeah.
And in a couple of years' time, I change it to 22 and then redeploy it. Then my infrastructure code will fail because it is an immutable field and it cannot deploy.
Definitely, yeah.
So I think there's, back to trade-offs and landing zones. You've got your landing zones with your base and then your infrastructure and your application. And then you want to be modular there because you don't want to redeploy the base every day.
No.
You don't want to redeploy the infrastructure every day.
No.
Same goes for Kubernetes. You really don't want to do that.
No.
But then you want to be able to redeploy the application every day.
The application,
So parts of the infrastructure, because maybe if, let's say I host a platform and it provides services to 100 customers.
Yeah.
Every customer gets their own storage account. Then I might have some infrastructure as code that whenever a new customer is provisioned, it will not only provision DNS and start the application, it will also provision a storage account dedicated for that customer.
Definitely.
But that's got a way shorter life cycle than the whole end. So how this comes together in my head is, you've got your static parts, which you need to test in DR tests every now and then, because you want to make sure that you can redeploy everything.
Yeah.
And then you've got your, more dynamic parts, with different life cycles. So then you even get to the point with how do I do my resource groups?
Yeah.
So because for my base infrastructure, I've got like shared and I've got spoke and I've got hub and whatever I name it.
Yeah.
And I've got customer specific things in their own resource group, and that could be a storage account, a database, and it's got a different life cycle. And then you go back to life cycle management, which comes down to how you go about resource group usage, which also means something in your landing zones. But then I've got a resource group specific to a customer. I don't want to have hard-coded customer names in my landing zone, so that needs to be repeatable. So you could say you have like a static and a dynamic part of your infrastructure as code.
Yeah, definitely. And also another way to use, for example, pipelines in an environment to do the things you say you can do, is to use code to check your WAF code based on WAF compliance. So if you say, hey, I want to deploy a new infrastructure to my landing zone, it's not redeploy but add it to my new environment, or because I have new software or a new whatsoever, then you can check your code using, for example, a PS rule to check if the code what you are implementing, so the infrastructure is WAF aligned or not WAF aligned. And you can also customize that. So I'm a big do not click it, because click it will give you more errors in the environment, if you know what I mean.
Well, I mean, in the end, landing zones, infrastructure is code.
Yeah.
Right? And infrastructure is code means we make it scalable, we make it repeatable. ClickOps is no longer a thing.
No.
Well, that's a good way to end a conversation. Don't do ClickOps.
Don't do ClickOps.
Do landing zones.
With landing zones, never. And because, like I said, you can also integrate your web framework into your infrastructure as code, that it will be compliant. And it doesn't really mean that you check all the boxes when you implement the code, because maybe it's not right. But you can also customize your WAF Well-Architected Framework in your infrastructure code as with your company standards. So don't do ClickOps then.
All right,
that's a good one.
Well, so do do the well-architected framework.
Yeah, definitely.
Do landing zones.
Yes.
Don't do ClickOps.
Don't do ClickOps.
And you should be fine.
I think so.
All right.
Yeah.
And with that, we're ending this episode of Talking Out Cloud. Thank you for joining me, everyone. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Now, have a good day.
Thank you very much.